Hey friends, thanks for clicking on this video and joining in on another experiment with blended charcoal sources for homemade black powder. And as the title is letting everybody see, it's Aspen and Osage Orange and the blend's 50-50. Now some of you may be wondering why Aspen. Well, just simply because about a year and a half ago I started experimenting with Aspen as a charcoal source, and then my friend Robert got me some alder, and I set aside the Aspen and started experimenting with that because I was under the impression that it was buckthorn alder, and we found out afterwards it wasn't. It was either the white alder, the red alder, maybe even the European alder, but it certainly wasn't what everybody calls buckthorn alder. So at that point I got rid of all of my Aspen. And then a couple of weeks ago, I'm looking over my numbers and I'm realizing, Aspen wasn't really all that bad, in particular as a blended charcoal source. Again, we'll look at the, I'll turn the camera here in a little bit and we'll look at the differences. Aspen had a specific gravity of 0.45, Osage Orange 0.82. Now, the first time I tested Aspen as a standalone gunpowder, my 5-shot average was 17-16, and I had a high spread. So that's really not all that impressive. But my first shot with Aspen going down a clean barrel was 1789. Again, that's a little bit more respectable. Now, it gets better because when I blended the Aspen with my juniper, the first shot going down a clean barrel was 1829. So blending it seemed to be better. When I blended my Aspen with the alder, first shot going down a clean barrel was 1856. So I think you can probably see why I want to experiment with it a little bit more. Whereas according to my numbers, Osage Orange as a standalone charcoal, 5-shot average was only 1765. When I blended Osage Orange with the alder, 5-shot average was 1880. So I kind of want to see what this is going to happen as a blended charcoal with Aspen and Osage Orange. Now, just so that you know, on the other property behind me, it's an abandoned piece of property, there's a wash that runs through there, and there are aspens along that wash, and this is where the aspen came from. So for me, it's basically a local source, whereas the first time I started experimenting with it, it came from the Raton, New Mexico area. So I'm anxious to try this. But before I turn the camera and show you the value of what I've got here, I just kind of want to reference something here. And I'm going to go back to the statement I made in the previous video, dogma over data. In Brett's book, Like Fire and Powder, on page 12, he's got a list of the blends. And not every blend is 75, 15, 10. Well, actually it is. But it's broken down differently. My formula is 76, 15, 11. Okay, and I previously showed you why I do that. Because by the time you take 75 grams, put it in a warm heat source, you can lose as much as, well, almost to another gram. So you want to add a little bit to it to compensate for that weight loss if the formula is based on weight. Okay? But I do want to read something here that I've got pulled aside on the same page. I got it highlighted. It is certain that the intimate incorporation of the ingredients is far more important than the chemical proportions. Okay? He was certainly correct, speaking about the writer of an article that he's referencing. he was certainly correct in that the process of manufacture and incorporation of the ingredients was more important than the exact ratios of ingredients used. Okay? And I've mentioned this before on this channel. Your potassium nitrates provides the oxygen that feeds the sulfur, which is the fire. The more oxygen you have, per se, the more complete your fire burning is going to be. Okay? Now I also want to read something also, because from time to time I get somebody that leaves comments on here criticizing my formula and doing some mathematics, and then tries to convince me that my mixture is weak based on my 76, 15, 11. And that's actually going in the opposite direction with the mathematics. Okay? Because you can't have a greater source of oxygen and a greater source of fire and then have the whole unit become a negative. You just can't do that. But I want to read something here about graphite glazing, because what I've noticed that those people that like to go and copy and paste the mathematics on these numbers and other things like compressing pressers with a 12-ton jack versus a 20-ton jack, blah, blah, blah. In all of this, nobody has ever sent me anything about graphite, because Swiss uses a heavy graphite glazing, and I've done this on this channel. I've taken 100 grams of Swiss and I've remilled it and separated the graphite, and what you end up with is just plain old black powder. That's what you end up with. But the graphite in itself is an addition to. So when you want to send me those numbers telling me how wrong or how bad my method of doing this is, you have never ever, no one has ever sent how much of a contaminant graphite is in your mathematics. So I want to read this. On page 98, graphite is a contaminant, just like the undesirable impurities in potassium nitrate or the lead from the milling process. Graphite also raises the ignition temperature of gunpowder. Well, just stop right there. That's what the sulfur does. It raises the ignition temperature. So if I have an additional gram of sulfur, and I'm using that as the means to compact the gunpowder instead of your dextrin, see, nobody thinks about that when they send me those mathematic numbers. Well, what about the dextrin that you're using as a binder? No one has ever done that. Well, how about using sulfur as the binder instead of the dextrin? The dextrin is a contaminant. The sulfur helps with the ignition process. And if you have a little bit more sulfur, shouldn't that make the whole entire compound be that much more sensitive to ignition? You guys have seen what my lock has done. It's super fast. And I've even done comparisons with Swiss in my lock. And people have noted on this channel, yeah, the Swiss in your flash pan appears to be a little bit slower. Going on. Okay. Graphite also raises the ignition temperature of gunpowder and makes it harder or slower to ignite. Captain Smith acknowledged that graphite coating gives a fine, silvery surface to the grain, but warns that graphite is really an impurity and therefore it should be applied sparingly to the powder. But yet, here's Swiss using a heavy graphite glazing. They're adding an impurity to their gunpowder, at least according to Captain Smith. And Brett, Gibbons is repeating what's already been stated over 100 years ago. So please, let's get rid of the dogmatism and let's get right down to the data. Because my data has shown, granted, not all chronographs agree, temperature, elevation, angle of the sun gives you all different numbers. And with that being said, these numbers only really mean something to me. It's just that simple. All right, so let me get the camera turned around and show you the value of 15 grams of each, and then I'll show you the center one is the value of both of them combined. So I think it's pretty simple to figure this out. It's 15 grams of Osage orange. That's how much it occupies in this jar. There's 15 grams of Aspen. And then this is 7.5 plus 7.5, 15 grams combined. So get this all blended up, get out to the shooting range, and we'll see what it does. I'm going to shut this off for a moment because I'd like to read something from Brett Gibbons' book, Like Fire and Powder. And I would recommend you buy this. I'm not being paid to push this. I'm using this information because the dogmatic people keep coming to this channel and pushing dogmatism over data. Okay? So I want everybody that's making homemade black powder to understand this. Alright, so I'm going to read Chapter 5, Sulfur. Now this is something that I've known about sulfur for quite some time, so I want you all to hear it from someone else, a published author. It is generally accepted that sulfur's unique bonding characteristics help hold the triumvirate, the three components of ingredients together. Now, go back in this channel, you will see that I have taken some sulfur and I put it underneath my 12-ton jack, and another popular word is plasticize. Okay, and that's how I was introduced to this years ago, the value of adding the added gram of sulfur over the other binding agent, dextrin. Okay, because I learned early on that dextrin fouls a flintlock in particular in the touch hole quicker than anything else. So I did a research and I discovered, although it's not my discovery, someone else had already put it up on the internet, that sulfur acts as a binding agent. That's why I use the extra gram of sulfur. Going on. Although the once popular theory that sulfur bonds with the nitrate to fill the pores of the charcoal has largely been disproven. But yet some of that information still floats around. Another important role of sulfur is in rising the heat of the gases generated when gunpowder burns. Gases take up greater volume when at high temperatures, and this directly equates to stronger gunpowder and higher velocities. Bye. Alright, I just pulled the powder off the dashboard of my truck. It's been drying for about 4 hours, and I shot it with my temperature gauge, and it read 137 degrees, and you can see it's right at 80 grains, and it's right at 0. Okay. And the powder's in the pan. Somebody recently asked about my 80 grains by weight and how do I make sure that it's what it is in the powder measurer. So I weigh it, I put it in my powder measurer, and I always settle it. I've done a video on this channel before showing what the difference was by settling it and not settling it. Okay, settle it and go just a little bit more to the top. Hopefully I won't spill any. And remember, my gunpowder is a good blend of 3F with 4F fines in it, and it's probably more than of a 3F than anything else. Okay, but I got the powder right flush to the top. You can see that. Okay. Oh wow. I'm going to put that back in the pan. And that is on 80 grains by volume evenly. And this is 50-50 Osage orange and Aspen. And that's plucked with a 12-ton jack. That's pretty damn good. I think I nailed it on that one. But since I have two, we'll do the same thing with this one and see where it rests with the same settled charge. Just I'm gonna pull it down just a hair, resettle it, because it's not flattening itself out across the top. There we go. Okay. Again, right at the top. That also is right at 80 grains by volume. All right, well, since it's later in the day and it's well away from my testing times, between 10 and 11 o'clock in the morning, we will set this for a good day, and I've got my 4F for the flash pan ready to go. So when it's appropriate, I'll turn the camera back on and we'll see what kind of numbers we can get with this blended gunpowder. Putting the scale away, I just remembered something. That's without the added weight of any graphite. Business as usual. So there's the plate glass. As you can see, a lot of blue smoke on the outer edge. A little darker in here. Rub my finger across it. About normal. Through the center of it. Not a whole lot left in the center of the burn. And the pieces that were there were very, very minute. So I'm anxious to see what this is going to do through my flintlock. Okay, just a couple of quick comments before we go to shooting here. I got a new ramrod made, as you can see, and I do need to correct that statement. It was not a hickory ramrod that snapped. It was actually maple. So I want to correct that. This one is actually hickory. So, and it's just a little bit tight in the thimbles right now. But I'm going to go ahead and use my range rod to load these shots. And also in the previous video I mentioned about that's where you get a flash in the pan. A couple of you picked up on that. Thank you, appreciate that. I caught it in the editing program, but I just didn't feel the need to put a text because I figured, you guys would have figured out that, oh, he didn't say that correctly. But, again, some people feel compelled to make those corrections for me. So thank you. And also, another thing, I kind of find this a little redundant, just from the perspective of I've done so many videos with my homemade black powder, and unless I specifically say, well, on this one I'm going to be using Schützen 4F or Elephant 4F, you should just assume that I'm using the same gunpowder in the lock that I'm testing down the barrel. But once again, you know, people will say, well, what gunpowder were you using? Again, redundancy as far as I'm concerned. It's really redundant. So anyhow, I'm going to finish getting set up. It's about 10:15 in the morning. I'll probably wait just a little bit more. As of right now, it's 48 degrees. Give it another 30 minutes, it'll be above 50 because the temperature's rising quick. So I'll get everything situated here, and we'll turn the camera around, and we'll see what that first shot's going to produce as far as feet per second. Just to let you know, it's 10:35 in the morning, and I am shooting with my prescription glasses on today. For me, it's a trade-off. I can see the bullseye really clear, but at this point, the rear sight becomes fuzzy. So I'm just going to be guessing as to where the front sight is as it pertains to the rear sight. What's that say? 1864? Again, I got too much sun reflecting in the view screen. Let me go get a closer look as I go mark off the target. That's correct. 1864. I found the patch. It's not half bad. It's still a little damp. So when it dries out, it's going to lighten up in color. And I drilled the bullseye. Going to get reloaded and get some more numbers. Okay, that one's 1806. And there's the patch. That's a little on the dark side, but still, it's damp. All right, I'll get another number for us. $18.17. So as you guys probably observed, I was struggling a little bit to pick up that bullseye in that rear sight, and that third shot reflects that. I found that patch. It's no different than the other ones. Still damp, but I think once it dries out, it's going to lighten up quite a bit. All right, I'll get another number. So just to let everybody know, I did load that round with my ramrod, and easy peasy. Went all the way down, no problems whatsoever. So, all right, let's get on with it. $17.91. Well, there it is, 1813. Not too bad for a blended gunpowder. Okay, so I'm going to take one more shot so I can get rid of that higher number, 1864, going down a clean barrel, and we'll get 5 shots with an average and a spread going down a dirty barrel. What is it, 1820? 1826. Let me go get a closer view. I was wrong. 1828. There's that final patch. No worse than anything else, guys. No worse than anything else. All right, let me get some numbers crunched. I'll give you the average and the spread, and then we'll look at the target. Okay, here's the numbers. The 6 shots, including that first shot going down a clean barrel, 6-shot average was 1819 with a spread of 73. If it's worth anything, standard deviation of 22. I don't think that means anything in a muzzleloader. Throwing out that first shot and keeping the 5 shots going down a dirty barrel, 5-shot average was 1811 with a spread of 37. Again, standard deviation 12. Where's the 300 feet per second spread as some people are claiming? I don't get it. The most I've ever had for a spread was 160, and that was with the ironwood. But when I did my second testing of that, you know, realizing that the chronograph recorded a couple of very high numbers. I think it was 1799 or something like that, with about like a 63, 64 spread. So again, there's a lot of crap that gets thrown out there, but until you do what I'm doing, and if you get some numbers that you don't like, retest them, just simply because time, elevation, angle of the sun, and not all chronographs agree. And remember, my blend is 2F, 3F with 4F fines, but it's mainly a 3F. So take it for what it's worth, guys. At this point, I really don't give a shit. I honestly don't. Because as I've mentioned, and more so now, I've got the numbers that I want. I know what my gun does. In fact, there's the target. Other than this one right here, shot number 3, everything is right here. 30 yards. And as I mentioned, one of those shots, you could see I was struggling trying to pick up the bullseye in my rear sight. And I had a lot of that, you know, the heat rising off of the barrel, and I think that kind of obscured whatever shot I took. And I think it was shot number 3. But hey, either way, I don't care. This group right here, this 5-shot group right here, is pretty damn good for a blend of 2F, 3F, and 4F with a spread of 37 with a 5-shot average. Take it for what it's worth. Don't believe everything you hear. Thanks for watching, and everybody have a great day. Bye.